The seat they gave me said everything they thought about me. Table 18. Back corner of the Westfield Estate ballroom. Half hidden behind an oversized floral arrangement. One chair occupied. One chair conspicuously empty. A place setting laid out beside me like a polite reminder that something, or someone, was missing. The lonely uncle table. From where I sat, I could barely see the head table. Marcus, my nephew, beamed beside his new wife, Penelope, surrounded by their perfectly matched, perfectly paired friends. Everyone there fit neatly into the same mold. Young, upwardly mobile, married on schedule. And then there was me, 41 years old. Single, as far as they knew. Successful, but in the wrong way. Useful for advice. Acceptable for polite conversation. Pitiable enough to be seated alone. "We saved you a seat, Uncle Daniel," Marcus had said the day before, offering a tight smile that tried and failed to hide its condescension. "Don't worry about bringing anyone. We understand you're still looking. Still looking." As if my life were an unfinished draft. As if my value hinged on whether I'd produced a partner by a certain age. I adjusted my cufflinks and took in the room. Crystal chandeliers. Champagne fountains. Floral arrangements that probably cost more than my first car. This wedding wasn't about love alone, it was about image. And I didn't fit it. What no one here knew, what I'd been legally prohibited from discussing until next week, was that for the past 18 months, I hadn't been looking for anyone at all. I'd already found her. Crown Princess Isabella of Denmark. Third in line to the throne. Internationally respected humanitarian. And the woman who had said yes when I proposed 3 months ago on a private beach in the Maldives. But here, tonight, none of that mattered. To them, I was just the cautionary tale. The man who chose career over family. The uncle who traveled too much. The one who never settled down. My brother Michael had explained it all away effortlessly at the rehearsal dinner. "Daniel does consulting work in Europe," he'd said, swirling his wine. "Always traveling. Never stays in one place. You know how those types are. Career-obsessed. Non-committal. Temporary." The irony almost made me laugh. My consulting work involved serving as a senior advisor to the European Commission on Economic Development, an appointment that required living in Copenhagen and working closely with Scandinavian governments. That work was precisely how Isabella and I had met at a policy conference 2 years earlier. But no one here asked about that. They never did. A server passed by my table without stopping, distracted by louder guests and bigger groups. I cleared my throat politely. She startled, apologized, and poured me champagne with a look that suggested she'd forgotten I was there. I didn't blame her. The room had already decided I was invisible. As the main course ended and plates were cleared, the toasts began. Penelope's father spoke first, something about ambition, success, and building a life early. Marcus's best man followed with stories about finding the one before 30 and locking it down before life complicated things. Then my brother stood. Michael lifted his glass, already flushed from champagne and sentimentality. "And I want to acknowledge my brother, Daniel," he said loudly. A ripple of polite attention moved through the room. I felt it before I heard it, the familiar tightening in my chest. "Still out there searching for love," Michael continued, smiling as if he were doing me a kindness. "At 41, still hopeful. Still believing his person is out there somewhere." Soft laughter followed. Heads turned. Eyes flicked toward the back corner. Toward the empty chair beside me. "We all hope Daniel finds what Marcus and Penelope have found," Michael went on, warming to his theme. "That someday he'll stop chasing career advancement long enough to build a real life. To finally settle down." That was when the sound started. Low at first. Distant. A rhythmic thrum that didn't belong to the music or the chatter. The helicopter. I checked my watch. Right on time. Michael faltered mid-sentence, confused. Guests began looking around, brows furrowing as the sound grew louder. Through the tall terrace windows, lights swept across the lawn. The venue manager appeared at my side, pale and sweating. "Mr. Svensson," he whispered urgently, "the security team is requesting access." "Let them in," I said calmly. She asked for minimal disruption. My sister-in-law Catherine overheard, her confusion visible. "Security team. Eh." Before she could ask more, the doors opened. The Royal Danish Protection Unit entered first. Discreet, controlled, unmistakably elite. They moved with practiced efficiency, establishing positions without raising their voices. The ballroom fell silent as guests realized something extraordinary was happening. And then she appeared. Crown Princess Isabella stepped into the room. Elegant, composed, effortlessly commanding without demanding attention. Her presence shifted the atmosphere instantly, not through arrogance, but through confidence earned over a lifetime of public duty. She scanned the room once. Then her eyes found me. Daniel, she said warmly, her Danish accent adding music to my name. I'm sorry I'm late, darling. The UN meeting ran over. Every single head in the room snapped toward table 18. She crossed the ballroom without hesitation, past the head table, past my brother frozen in place, past the perfectly paired couples, until she reached the lonely uncle in the back corner. She leaned down and kissed me with the ease of someone who had nothing to prove. Miss me? I asked softly, standing. Always, she replied, smiling. How was the seating? Her gaze flicked to the empty chair beside me. Interesting. The room was dead silent. And the real story was about to begin. For several seconds, no one spoke. Not a whisper. Not a clink of glass. The kind of silence that presses against your ears until it feels physical. Crown Princess Isabella stood beside me, her hand resting naturally on my arm, as if this were the most ordinary thing in the world. As if arriving by royal helicopter to a wedding where her fiancé had been seated alone was simply logistics. Around us, faces registered disbelief in stages. Confusion first. Then recognition. Then panic. Penelope's father, who had spent cocktail hour explaining his hedge fund strategies to anyone who would listen, rose halfway out of his chair, staring openly now. His expression shifted the moment realization hit. Oh my God, he breathed. My brother Michael looked like the blood had drained straight out of him. His champagne glass trembled slightly in his hand. Isabella glanced around the ballroom, taking everything in with sharp, intelligent calm. The isolated table. The empty seat. The fact that no one else had been placed anywhere near me. She turned back to me, voice soft but perfectly audible. Interesting seating choice, she said. When I attend events with you in Copenhagen, you're usually seated with ministers and ambassadors. The words weren't accusatory. They were surgical. A murmur rippled through the guests. Marcus, my nephew, slid out of his chair at the head table and started toward us, Penelope following a step behind, her carefully composed wedding smile already cracking. Uncle Daniel, Marcus said, breathless. I didn't know. You didn't ask, I replied evenly. Penelope's mother appeared beside them, face tight with alarm. If we had known royalty was attending. I'm not here as royalty, Isabella interrupted, turning to her with a polite smile that somehow carried steel beneath it. I'm here as Daniel's fiancé. Fiancé. The word detonated. Phones appeared instantly. Guests leaned toward one another, whispering furiously. Somewhere near the back, someone gasped audibly. Isabella reached for the empty chair beside me, and sat down without hesitation. This seat will do, she said calmly. Though perhaps we could have champagne that's actually French. The one served back here was underwhelming. A few nervous laughs followed. Most people were too stunned to react. My brother finally found his voice. Daniel, you never said you were engaged. You never asked about my personal life, I replied. You decided who I was based on what was convenient. Catherine, my sister-in-law, joined him, her face cycling rapidly through embarrassment and disbelief. But if we'd known you were with. That's precisely the issue, Isabella said gently, cutting her off. Daniel's worth shouldn't change based on who he's with. Her gaze moved slowly around the table, then across the room. He's advised governments on economic recovery frameworks. He's shaped policy affecting millions of people. He's respected across Europe. She looked back at my brother. And yet, he was seated alone because he didn't conform to your expectations of how a life should look. Michael swallowed hard. We didn't know he couldn't say anything. He didn't owe anyone an explanation, Isabella replied. Privacy is not loneliness. She reached for my hand. The engagement ring caught the light, flawless diamond, framed by deep blue Danish royal sapphires. Someone near the head table let out a sharp intake of breath. Cameras flashed. Marcus's best man was still standing where he'd been frozen mid-toast, champagne glass hovering uselessly in the air. Royal Danish security maintained a discreet perimeter, but their presence transformed the entire atmosphere. This was no longer just a wedding reception. It was now a global event. "Daniel," Marcus said quietly, stepping closer. "I thought I was being considerate. I thought." "You thought 40 meant failure," I said calmly. "You thought unmarried meant incomplete." Penelope stepped forward, voice strained. "We would have seated you differently. We would have included you more." "Only because of who I'm with," I replied. "Not because of who I am." That landed hard. Isabella checked her watch. "We should leave soon. Early flight back to Copenhagen." Penelope's father rushed forward, trying to recover. "Your Royal Highness, it would be an honor," she smiled politely. "Another time." My mother had finally pushed through the crowd, my father close behind. Both looked shaken, as if an entire narrative they'd relied on had just collapsed. "Daniel," my mother said softly. "We had no idea." "I tried to tell you," I replied. "You made jokes instead." Isabella stood, posture commanding the room without effort. "Daniel Swenson is not a man who needs rescuing," she said clearly. "He is a man who built a full life, one you never bothered to look at." The message was unmistakable. As we turned to leave, guests parted instinctively. Phones followed us. Outside, the helicopter waited on the lawn, rotors idling. "Too much?" Isabella asked quietly as we walked. "Perfect," I replied. Behind us, Marcus's wedding reception buzzed, not with celebration, but with shock. The lonely uncle narrative had collapsed. And the reckoning had only just begun. We didn't rush. That was the part people never expect. Isabella and I walked at a measured pace across the lawn, the sound of the helicopter steady in the background, its lights washing over the manicured grass. Behind us, the reception hall buzzed with confused voices and frantic whispers. But none of that belonged to us anymore. The narrative had already changed. Not because I announced anything. Not because I corrected anyone. But because their assumptions had collapsed under the weight of reality. As we reached the helicopter, Isabella paused and looked back once. Not at the crowd, but at the building itself. "Do you feel lighter?" she asked. I considered it. "Yes," I said. "Not because they finally understand, but because I no longer care whether they do." She smiled, satisfied. "Good. That's the correct outcome." Inside the helicopter, my phone vibrated relentlessly. Missed calls. Messages. Notifications stacking faster than I could read them. Marcus called. Declined. Michael called. Declined. My mother texted. "Please come back inside. We're proud of you." Proud. The word landed strangely. Not painful. Just hollow. Isabella watched me silence the phone and tuck it away. "You don't owe anyone a performance," she said. "Including forgiveness." As the helicopter lifted off, the Westfield estate shrank beneath us. From above, it looked exactly as it had an hour earlier, elegant, immaculate, impressive. But I knew better now. It had been built on appearances. And appearances never survive scrutiny. By the time we landed, the story had already gone global. Royal engagement revealed at family wedding. Crown princess attends private American ceremony unannounced. Economist fiancé identified as senior EU advisor. By morning, every major outlet had picked it up. The wedding footage, particularly the shot of Isabella walking past the head table to the back corner, was everywhere. The lonely uncle table became a symbol. Commentators dissected it. Analysts wrote think pieces. Social media did what it always does. Magnified the truth until it was impossible to ignore. But what none of them saw was the quiet aftermath. The calls that stopped coming. The invitations that suddenly became apologetic. The tone shift. Michael left me a voicemail 2 days later. He apologized, not cleanly, not fully, but sincerely enough to matter. He admitted he'd reduced my life to a joke because it was easier than admitting he didn't understand it. Marcus sent a message a week after that. I was wrong. I thought success followed one path. I see now that I was projecting my own fear. I didn't reply immediately. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Respect isn't something you rush back into. It has to be rebuilt, slowly, consistently, without conditions. My parents came last. They didn't ask for money. They didn't ask for access. They asked for time. That I could consider. Because the revenge here wasn't humiliation.